Hello again, everybody. This is Kevin Hicks with another EarthWorks Turf Talk. This will be the third installment of my construction series. And in this one, we will go over some materials and material selection and testing. It's a huge topic, and there's no way in a couple of minutes that I can do this justice. But there's a couple of bullet points that I wrote down that I think are important when you're considering a project of really any scope. Our first one was an overview. The second episode was planning and permitting, which we kind of went over a few details there. If you didn't get that, go back and take a look and a listen to that one. Um, this one we're going to get into materials and testing, like I said, but there's a lot more to it. If you've got questions, certainly reach out to me. I've got a lot of people that we've worked with over the last couple of years that can help you if you've got questions specific to regions and so forth. Um, first thing I wanted to cover is construction mixes and irrigation components. Have you purchased those ahead of time? Have you done the research on that? Specifically with this, have you tested materials? I want to get into materials first, but have you tested materials, greens mixes, tea mixes, maybe plating material for fairway caps, so on and so forth? There's a couple of labs that we work with. We typically on traditional soil testing, we work with Logan Labs, but they're not equipped to do that kind of testing. Um, Turf and soil diagnostics is probably first and foremost of our recommendation. The ISTRIC lab does a great job, and I'll have links to both of those with their contacts at the bottom in the notes. But definitely make that a priority. And then secondarily, but not very far behind, is once you settle on a spec or a material that's going to suit the needs of your project, does your supplier have the supply that they need to finish the project? I was on a site visit down south recently, and they found a spec that really met their needs. It was a little bit tighter spec than for greens than a lot of people would go with, but they wanted that playability function. Unfortunately, they didn't even have close to enough material to build all 20 greens. So now they're going to, mid-project, they're going to have to go back to the drawing board and do something a little bit different. So, you don't typically have the time to do that in process. So make sure that they've got the supply that you need to complete the project. If you're blending, similar to the permitting and planning, if you're doing blending of peat or other amendments, we'll get into the amendments in the next conversation, but um, have you given a blender adequate time to organize the materials, to get them on site and get them blended and back to you? That's really important because a lot of times, time is money. If your contractor is waiting on materials to be blended, it's going to cost you a whole lot of money. Also, make sure that you're planning for freight and storage. Freight rates right now are fluctuating quite a bit, and storage. You start putting 3, 5, 8,000 yards of material somewhere on site, and it becomes pretty challenging. That pile will grow in a hurry if you're not consuming it at the same rate. So make sure that you've got that accounted for. Next thing I wanted to bring up is sod selection, and I could probably roll seed into this as well, but uh, I know in the East Coast there's going to be a lot of challenges with winter kill, and if you've got a project that's pending, and all of a sudden the golf course down the road had a bunch of warm season grass that didn't come back from all the horrific weather that you've had, you might not be front of the line anymore. So make sure that you've got that taken care of. One of the ways to do that, it might cost you a little bit up front, but it's a good insurance policy, is to contract grow. If you know the square footage that you're going to need, and I think this is really important with greens material selection. Contract growing might keep you at the front of the line where unpredictable weather patterns and so forth might change their priorities in who they're supplying. Just make sure that that's taken care of. And then seed supply, same thing. It varies from year to year. Out west, where most of the seed is produced, we're seeing an incredibly dry year, and forecasts are not positive, so yields could be down. Make sure that you've got an adequate supply of seed if that's the direction that you're going before you even start. so that you're not caught off guard in that regard. Capping materials, I'm not going to get into this a lot, but just make sure that you've got um, on the install specifically, you can do the same thing with testing, but on the install specifically, make sure that you've got somebody monitoring quality control. Had a couple projects where capping fairways has not worked out very well because the depth was not consistent enough, and they've created quite a drainage issue. So I think that's incumbent upon your folks internally to ensure that the contractor is doing what their contract requires, and make sure that that's a suitable material in the first place. Irrigation components is the last thing I'd say is I'm seeing more and more operations that are purchasing their own equipment or their own components. I don't know that I would do that, but regionally it seems to be a thing that's happening a little bit more frequently. But just making sure that you've got all those selections and working with your irrigation designer to get that all set up ahead of time so that there aren't any supply chain challenges. Again, contractors waiting, that clock ticks and they don't care whether they're working or not. They're charging you for it. So make sure that those things are lined up well ahead of time, and you've got the materials list as complete as it possibly can be ahead of time. Those are a few of the things that I thought about. I know, like I said, there's a thousand other things that need to be considered, but just some things to keep in the back of your mind when you're planning a project of really any size is getting those materials tested and selected well ahead of time. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast and the Turf Talks, make sure you do so, and we'll look forward to talking again. Thanks.